With so much media controversy on so many issues surrounding the White House, I sat down with Kellyanne Conway, the president's counselor in New York. Kellyanne Conway, welcome.
Thank you, Hallie.
You often talk about how the media focuses less on issues, more on sideshows, controversies, flap of the day, and that's a fair point. But doesn't President Trump drive some of that when he tweets about everything from wiretapping to Arnold Schwarzenegger leaving The Apprentice?
Well, look, in the first 50 days of his presidency, the president has given anybody who wants to cover his administration fairly and fully a panoply of options. It depends on what they want to cover. I do find a lot of the coverage suffers from what I would refer to as sameness. I mean, shortly after
a certain group think you're saying?
Well, just you know, why, instead of everybody looking out of the same pane of glass all the time, why not turn your head 30 degrees that way and you can still see what everybody else is saying, but wow, a whole new world opens up.
But one of those panes of glass is the president's use of Twitter, which is a very effective communication tool with him, but it sometimes leads to stories that take away from tax cuts, Obamacare, and the elements of his agenda.
Not for the people, though. I disagree. I think the people writ large, it's a big country out there outside of the know-it-alls, and the big country out there listens to him in that joint session address, and they still know he's a man of action, a man of impact. They know that he is somebody who just looked them in the eye for an hour and said that he will repeal and replace Obamacare. He called ISIS savages. He said radical Islamic terrorism. He said we will build the wall, that we are a nation that has spent billions of dollars in many years helping other countries protect their sovereignty and their borders. It's high time we did it ourselves. He went on, and so people heard that. But I do want to just say one thing about Twitter, and you know, as somebody who, as his campaign manager and now counselor to the president, I heard from people in the campaign, oh, you have to take away his Twitter, take his phone, delete his. Are you kidding me? This is the way he communicates and connects directly with people, and it's a democratization of information for him. It's that the laborer looking at his screen while he's on the job, the stay-at-home mom tending to her kids who has the computer up in the corner, the CEO billionaire who's cosseted with everybody around him, telling him what's going on in the world and what the social media feed says, and then the academic in the ivory tower. All four of them, and you and me, can see what he said at the same exact time.
No quarrel.
For free.
I want to get to Obamacare, but since we're on this subject, it was just last weekend the president tweeted about Barack Obama having tapped his wires, that he engaged in McCarthyism, that he acted like Nixon in Watergate, that he's a bad or sick guy. And you and Sean Spicer and Vice President Pence and others have been very careful not to personally endorse that view, which doesn't have any evidence that we know of. Isn't that a difficult position for you?
I'm not in a difficult position, but I will just emphasize what the president has said, which is he had called upon the House and Senate Intelligence Committees to add this piece of the investigation to their existing investigation about Russia, and they've agreed to do that. And so we'll make a comment after those findings are complete.
The media narrative on Obamacare is this: the left doesn't like it, makes predictions, millions of people may lose their coverage. But your real problem politically is with the House conservatives, who say it doesn't go far enough, too much of a government role, it's Obamacare light and all of that. Doesn't that coverage reflect the fact that this is a tough political battle for you?
Obamacare is very tough. It's been a disaster for many people. It certainly has helped some Americans, and the president has committed that no one will lose access to coverage, Howie, that there will be a smooth transition for those who currently rely on the exchanges. But that's not most Americans. So many Americans complain about the unaffordability, the crushing unaffordability of health care. They were promised lower premiums. You have this unaffordable care of high premiums. You have these small businesses who can't pool themselves together to get coverage. The president, in the three-pronged approach to health reform here, he will, in prong one, get rid of all those mandates, penalties, and taxes, hundreds of billions of dollars worth, expand the health savings accounts so you have better control. You know, nobody ever brings the rental car to the car wash before they return it. It's not theirs. So with health care spending, if it's yours, if you own the account, if it has your name on it, if you have more skin in the game, I think people will become more responsible consumers that way. Phase two is the regulatory phase. It's the phase that allows Secretary of HHS, Dr. Tom Price, to set up a regulatory framework that's more in keeping with a free market, patient-centric system. Thirdly, and this is where many things exist that animate those conservatives, it's interstate mobility of health care so that you can buy and sell health insurance across state lines. And med mal and tort reform is in there, and also drug pricing and a few other things.
One of the reasons, let me just jump in.
So it's all there, three
prongs. One of the reasons that the president has a problem with the most conservative wing of the Republican Party is that when he ran, he made clear that he likes certain aspects of Obamacare. pre-existing conditions, no ban there. Kids till 26 stay in the parents' policies, and no one would lose their coverage. That's not the doctrinaire conservative position, and so he now is in a sort of an ideological fight with people who want to do away with more of it. Would you concede that?
Howie, there's nothing to concede except to say the president is trying to repeal and replace Obamacare with a better system, but Obamacare is not a hypothetical idea in the wind.
It's a flawed program. It's also hard to take benefits away.
It's existed for 7 years. And pre-existing conditions and these young adults on their parents' plan until 26 are two pieces that are important to many Americans. And he's just... That's part of his plan, where he is repealing and replacing, is about Medicaid, is about the penalties and taxes. You know, I think this is Donald Trump at his best, the negotiator, the deal maker, the decision maker, the listener. This is a guy who is listening as President of the United States to all these different constituencies, and I wouldn't gloss over the fact that the Democratic Party is nowhere to be found on this except scaring Americans. No wonder the entrenched minority. Hey, folks, no wonder you lost 1,000 state legislative seats, control of the House and Senate, the governorships, the presidency. No, it's true. Because it's just scaring people. Where are the solutions?
It will take all his deal-making skills. All right. You have some pundits now, in the wake of the tweet storm last weekend, who are actually questioning the president's mental stability. Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC saying perhaps he should be removed under the 25th Amendment. I've never seen anything like this. What's your reaction?
I've never seen anything like this either. But Washington's never seen anything like President Donald Trump. He is doing exactly what he promised to do. When you come in as an outsider and you owe no one anything, and you're going to disrupt a bureaucracy that is so entrenched that you got to just get it out by root and branch. The tentacles are so deep and so clinging to power, to status, to money, to position, to each other. You're going to ruffle a lot of feathers. And so, first of all, people were not expecting him to win. I still think they're in shell shock 4 months later. Get over it. And secondly, they just don't seem to want to give him any kind of berth at all, let alone a wide berth, to govern. I mean, is there nothing good in the first 50 days for any of these people to cover?
Well, that's my question, because then you have people like Mika Brzezinski saying fake presidency, has no credibility. You know, it's fine. Every part of the press's job is to critique and criticize the president, but I wonder what you think about rhetoric like that.
Look, your show is about the press, but respectfully, it's a big country out there, and there are tens of millions of Americans who like what the president is doing and appreciate the fact that he is making good on his campaign promises and doing it very quickly.
You don't think the media coverage affects them? Do you think they tune it out? Do you think they don't trust it?
Well, the president's approval rating is much higher than the media's approval rating, and Congress's approval rating for that matter. But that all aside, if you look at the polls that matter most, what people think of some specific pieces of his program, and the number of people who think that he's making good on his promises and that he's moving quickly, and buried in the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll last week was just a treasure trove of positive information for President Trump. Among it, you had a majority of Americans saying that he would take the country in the right direction, or I think he would make real change. And then among the ones who said he would make change, among that 77%, they were asked, well then, would it be mostly positive change or mostly negative change? And by 2 to 1, they said mostly positive change. People feel optimistic. Look at the jobs report, 235,000 new jobs, 4.7%
Friday, yes,
unemployment. That's what matters to people.
I agree that matters a lot more than the scandals that we all get tied up in. It doesn't mean it's not a legitimate story. But you deal with journalists all the time, and the majority of the coverage of this president, and I've said this over and over again, has been negative. There's no getting around it. Whether it's justified, we can debate. Doesn't it make your job harder when the president names CNN, CBS, ABC, NBC, and the New York Times and says, enemy of the American people?
The president has made very clear that he would like to have, a good relationship with the press, but it's a two-way street, and we believe in a fair and free press. But with a fair and free press becomes responsibility, and the responsibility is also to not be presumptively negative at every turn. This is the president. I tell him, and I say publicly all the time, I'll say it again, he's his own best spokesperson. And I think when he does the press conference, when he goes to CPAC, when he does a rally in Melbourne, Florida, or maybe one coming up soon somewhere else, Howie, when he goes and addresses Congress in the joint session, that's Donald Trump at his finest. That's the president communicating, connecting people, and I hope he does a lot of that. I hope he gets his cabinet secretaries out on TV more. But it's nice for him to get, people are calling him names that I've never heard a president described before. I mean, seriously, maybe I'm old, but I was raised to respect the office of the president and its current occupant, no matter who it is. And I think by any quantitative objective analysis, the coverage of this president has been so presumptively negative and unfair and incomplete. And no, this is not a comment on the biased media. It's not what we're saying. We're just saying if he's had 34, 35 executive actions in the first 50 days, why is everybody covering one or two? I think the American people want to hear about the job creation.
The press is drawn to conflict.
There's an economic optimism you see reflected in the stock market, you see reflected in consumer confidence, and you see reflected in the job growth. The construction manufacturing job explosion in his first full month on the job really tells the tale.
I had more of my interview with Kellyanne Conway about her life under constant media scrutiny and criticism. Weigh in on the interview. Media Buzz at foxnews.com. But when we come back, why the president's unproven wiretapping claim is getting more coverage than ever, even as the White House tries to move on. We've heard from Kellyanne in defense of President Trump. More of that interview later. Now let's bring in our panel. Aaron McPike, a White House correspondent for Independent Journal Review. Meghan McCain, the co-host of Outnumbered. And Margaret Carlson, columnist for the Daily Beast. I put this question to Kellyanne Conway. Is it a problem that Trump's top aides, we saw a little bit of the clips at the top, can't personally vouch for his unproven claim about wiretapping? Or is this just journalists enjoying the story and pounding every guest for answers they can't provide?
I think it is a problem. You also played Sean Spicer at the top saying it isn't his job to get all that information from the president. I think that is his job. It is his job to go out and defend the president, so he should have access to that information.
Fox has confirmed an AP report saying the House Intelligence Committee has demanded information from the White House to back up the wiretapping claim by Monday, by tomorrow. So journalists may not want to let this go, but also you have interviews with members of Congress and former and current, or usually former CIA and FBI officials, all of which keeps this story going because no one's been able to point to much evidence.
The problem with the story right now is we don't know what we don't know. The White House could have a bunch of information on this and a bunch of evidence, and the story could end up being 100% true. But right now, we're all, evolving in conspiracy theories and what ifs, and that's a very difficult place to be. But do you know what we're not talking about? We're not talking about Jeff Sessions recusing himself. We're not talking about that scandal. And this is what Donald Trump does so well. He changes the media narrative with one tweet. He's been doing it since the campaign, and he did it again. We're not talking about that today.
He is very, very successful at that, at driving the media agenda, but at the same time, look where he has driven it into all this criticism about him making a charge that, at least the journalistic consensus is, he has not been able to back up.
Howie, if the White House had something, I think they would have put it out in order to help the story. In the interview with Kellyanne, which was very interesting, we haven't heard that much from her lately. Mr. Know-It-All, among all the know-it-alls in the press, let her have her say on almost every topic. But on the wiretapping tweet, she was conspicuously less forthcoming because no one does have this. I don't think it exists and they're not telling us. It doesn't exist, so they're not telling us.
Right. I mean, I understand the position, which is if the president is not giving you information and you're a spokesman, you're the counselor, you're the vice president of the United States, you can't go on television and say, well, I know this is true, or the president has assured me. So instead you retreat to where the president is now, which is let's have Congress investigate. But that, in turn, is driving the story.
There's also a complete and utter distrust of our national security and the CIA and the FBI becoming so politicized in the election cycle. So I speak to a lot of average Americans all the time, and they have reason to believe that maybe there are people inside the FBI that are doing this for political reasons, that want to take out great President Trump, who speaks for the people, who were in for the Obama administration. So that's another part of this problem right now.
There certainly is a lot of leaking, presumably from people who are holdovers in the previous administration, on some national security matters as well, against Donald Trump. All right, so this is all according to unnamed source or sources close to the former president. NBC says Barack Obama rolled his eyes at this allegation. CNN, he was irked and exasperated. Wall Street Journal, he was livid. But President Obama hasn't come out and said these things himself. This is all being filtered through sources.
But President Obama also has said that he doesn't necessarily want to come out and say much at the beginning of the new president's tenure. The question I asked on Monday of Sean Spicer was, has Donald Trump thought about picking up the phone and calling President Obama to ask him about this personally? Because the Trump administration is trying to hold the media to a very high set of standards. So shouldn't they be subject to the same standards, that you go to the subject and ask first before you accuse?
And Spicer's response?
He said, I don't know if they've talked. And we've found out since that they haven't spoken since the inauguration.
All right, let me get a break. Up next, some commentators now openly questioning the president's stability. Is that way over the line? And later, Kellyanne Conway on whether there's a double standard for top officials who are Republican and female. The uproar over President Trump's unproven claim about wiretapping has made some of his media detractors actually questioning his mental stability. In the case of Lawrence O'Donnell, saying he should be removed from office under the 25th Amendment.
I had hope and an open mind, and I have lost hope completely, and my mind is closed. This presidency is fake and failed.
This guy is now almost to the point, and I have a very strong suggestion as an American. I think that he ought not have control over the nuclear codes. It ought to have Pence, him, and the Secretary of Defense, because this guy is starting to lose it.
Whether he lied about President Obama because he is simply a buffoon, whether he accused President Obama of committing a crime because he is a madman.
Meghan McCain, is it over?
Lord, it's Sunday morning.
Your eyes are bulging out. So, is it over the top for pundits who can criticize the president's handling of the wiretapping issue? That is fine. To say things like, as Mika Brzezinski put it, fake president, failed president.
It's so over the top. It's so dramatic. It's worse than some things I've seen on The Bachelor this season. But you have to say, this only gives President Trump power. People, his hardcore supporters, they love that he makes the media uncomfortable. They love that he's like speaking truth to the media elite. And the warning I continue to give liberals and I continue to give people in liberal media is save your ammo for something that's actually worth it. If he actually does something that you really truly believe could be dangerous, could be compromising to our democracy. But until then, if you're absolutely hysterical every night on television, you lose any power whatsoever.
Well, one thing I would say is it's so bad it's good, right? Like, good television, good ratings, you know?
Well, but for those of us who are uninitiated, can you explain the Bachelor reference?
Well, it's so dramatic. It's over the top. I mean, I think when you're saying, you know, this is a fake president, oh my gosh, I think it is not commentary. It's just, you know, you sort of like, you know, opening up I think it's hysterical.
But, you know, the dishonest media had been giving Trump a break on tweets, saying that there was some rationale for them. He wanted to counteract a story before with a new tweet, just layer them on top.
Right.
This one came after his speech, which there was no rationale for taking attention away from that.
Well, it came after a successful speech to Congress, but then came the Jeff Sessions.
And he broke a taboo, which is to call the former president sick and bad.
Yeah.
And we usually, you know, have respect that, you know, the President's Club, there is a certain amount of comedy.
Maybe the pundits are trying to match Trump's language because they see that he gets a lot of clicks and attention when he uses inflammatory words. But look, the president's fair game for criticism by media. There's no debate about that. But having interviewed him since the 1980s, a successful businessman, a guy who won the White House when almost no one thought he could do it, is not a guy who's insane.
Well, yeah, he's not insane. I think the word that we hear from a lot of media right now is that he is unhinged. What does that even mean? You know, I think we need to slow down and just take everything step by step, ask direct questions, get the facts, and calm down.
It means he doesn't have impulse control. I think that he feels something, and he doesn't mediate it in any way, and then it's out there.
Okay, so speaking of impulse control, take away the nuclear codes. I mean, to what extent does this kind of language undermine the media's credibility, which already is at a low ebb when they are taking on when some, I want to emphasize, some commentators take on the president. Yeah,
obviously.
Well, what does this do to their credibility, to the media's credibility?
But that's what I've been trying to say since the rise of Donald Trump, is that if all Republicans are insane and Hitler, which sort of has been the narrative for a long time, comparing all Republicans to George Wallace, going back to my father on forward, then it doesn't matter. If you are hysterical about every move Donald Trump makes, which many people in the media have been, all it does is make his supporters think that you're part of the left's crooked media that doesn't understand.
Everything gets dialed up to 11. All right, stay put panel ahead on Media Buzz. The coverage of that damaging WikiLeaks dump on CIA spying techniques. Is Julian Assange getting a pass? But first, even the New York Times says the administration's highest ranking woman is being hit by lots of sexist attacks. More with Kellyanne Conway in a moment. More now of my sit-down in New York with Kellyanne Conway, and we began with a New York Times piece on the flack she gets as a woman. Let me read you a headline. sexist political criticism finds a new target, Kellyanne Conway. That's from the New York Times. The story says, what powerful political woman is mocked for her clothes, is the target of pictures on Twitter depicting her as haggard, and is routinely called a witch and a B-word. New York Times wrote a piece saying you were being unfairly attacked.
The B-word's not beautiful.
I just was not going to. What's your reaction to this being in the New York Times, saying that you're being unfairly attacked because you're a woman?
I was asked about that before I had read the article, actually, and I'm very heartened by the article. I did not participate in it, but I would note for you that a number of well-known Democratic, prominent liberal women that we know, like Karen Finney and Jen Palmieri, who worked very hard to elect Hillary Clinton and who I commend as you know, obviously very good consultants and worthy political opponents, they came to the defense of why a woman would be talked about in these terms. But you should also recognize that a lot of those comments come from women. And I just don't, I've turned off a lot of it. And if I don't read most of the praise and I don't read most of the criticism, like literally most of it, it keeps you in balance.
That's a good survival strategy.
Well, it's not just survival, it's prospering. I'm there to serve the president who's there to serve the American people. I'm not there to read about myself.
Part of the mockery, and this came up in a lot of these articles, including the Times, was, you know, that infamous photo of you taking a picture on the Oval Office couch, and you were trying to get everybody in the room, historically black colleges.
That's who I brought into the room.
Right, and then Democratic Congressman Cedric Richmond made a crude sexual joke about the position you were in. The women's groups didn't exactly come to your aid.
The silence was deafening, but remember, I'm pro-life. I am a high-ranking female White House official for President Donald Trump.
What about Nancy Pelosi? She was asked about it on CNN.
Very disappointed in...
said she didn't know, and she kind of...
Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. No wonder. She was a two-term speaker, and a majority of the voters were female across the country, and they didn't want her to be speaker anymore. I was very disappointed in her. She either was not telling the truth, that she wasn't aware of it, or it's not important enough to her caucus that they would bring this to her attention and ask her, this person who says every day, this one should recuse, that one should resign, that one should go be impeached. She had nothing to say about a member of her, a Democratic congressman, a member of her caucus, issuing such a tasteless, sexist joke, which a lot of liberals in the room did not think was funny, and brought to my attention immediately. She and I went to the same small Catholic women's college, the nation's oldest all-women's Catholic college, Trinity in Washington, D.C. And that small women's Catholic college can boast the first female Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, the first successful female presidential campaign manager. And the way they treat the two of us, the president of the college, is unbelievable. And you would think some of the alumni at all women's Catholic college would maybe be pro-life, or maybe object to Nancy Pelosi's abortion anyone, anytime, anywhere stance. But this is what happens when you refuse to call yourself a doctrinaire feminist, because in my view, you have to be pro-abortion, you have to be anti-male. Look at all these commercials on TV about men. They can't open up the garbage bag unless their wife shows them how. I mean, we treat men like they're fools. I don't look at my husband, my son, my cousins, my colleagues that way.
Let me jump in our remaining time. When you were off TV for about a week, CNN ran a story based on anonymous sources saying the White House had sidelined you. What did you think about that?
I didn't think much about it.
And then you went back on a bunch of TV interviews.
I did, and I am invited on TV routinely. I've been a very loud voice since the transition, and it's all out there, so anybody can pull the clips and the quotes of having our cabinet secretaries out there, our vice president, our president, other voices, and having less of us on TV. Why? It's not the campaign. The opponent is not, it's not a political opponent. It's a proactive agenda. And having us, because the president is the main messenger. And if I can go out and reinforce the message on his behalf, I'm happy to do it, and he likes seeing me out there. So one day I'm going to go get one of those fancy made-for-TV facelifts that women of a certain age seem to get on TV, and I'll make sure everyone knows about it, and you'll know ahead of time why I'm on for why I'm gone for 3 or 4 weeks. I'm sidelining myself.
Now, this is not a question that gets asked of men, but you brought this up on CBS Sunday Morning when you said that the one thing that would cause you to at least think about leaving the White House is your 4 kids who are still here in New York, haven't yet moved to Washington. Is it harder than you thought working for the president and being a mom.
No, it's not hard at all. In fact, it's more rewarding than I could have ever imagined, because the impact he can have on lives and will is truly remarkable, and it's why I'm there.
But it's only 24 hours in a day, and you've got children who need you as well. And
that's right. They do need their moms, and you're making me too accessible and relatable now. You know, remember, I'm a W, a witch, and a B, because now you're making me too nice. It's like, oh God, she has kids who love her. But it gives you great perspective, and Donald Trump is somebody who, as president, is the same as he was at the Trump Corporation, and what he's done in the cabinet, elevating women to high positions in his campaign. Certainly, he elevated women in New York real estate at a time when other men just did not. It's a very comfortable thing for him, and he is always very gracious and very aware of the fact that I have children. He knows it, and he's a very family-friendly, very pro-woman boss to have, and I'm very proud of my children as well, because they and family members, and certainly my husband, are working overtime to accommodate a situation that's unusual for us. And you know, Hallie, hats off to my male colleagues who also have kids, but they're the first ones to admit to me it's different for the mom. It just is different. I mean, some of my male colleagues ask, hey, how are the kids? I'll say, I don't know. Haven't seen them before. You know, I don't have that. Sometimes I'm up on FaceTime until midnight helping with slide presentations or reviewing the spelling list, and that's okay. So, and that's the answer as to why I look haggard too, you haters. I'm helping with 6th grade math, and I'm proud of it.
Kellyanne Conway Unplugged. Thanks very much for sitting down with us here in New York.
Thank you.
Coming up, the press feasts on the Republican warfare over replacing Obamacare. Is there a bit of gloating going on? And later, Ben Bradley and Katharine Graham again getting the Hollywood treatment. You guys just heard Kellyanne Conway talking about sexist attacks, as mentioned in the New York Times article, and also about the focus on her looks and whether she looks haggard because she's working so hard. She's got 4 kids. Let everybody react. Megan.
You know, listen, in the women's taking a day off work, women's protest this week, I talked a lot about the modern definition of feminism meaning a very different thing for liberal women than it does for conservative women, and I thought she summed that up very well. And I thought all the comments made by, I believe, a congressman, that vulgar comment you talked about, was completely beyond the pale. And I have also been surprised at Nancy Pelosi's response to it, not defending Kellyanne Conway.
You get a lot of flack on
every woman on top. All 3 of us will leave the studio and get flack about how we look and what we say. Yes.
I look like Scooby-Doo, apparently. And it gets sent to me, among other things. Kellyanne's wrong about women not defending her. I'm one of them. I thought a lot of things have been blown out of proportion. She's a lightning rod. There are men in the White House making many bigger mistakes than she did. I wish she hadn't done the facelift thing, because then she's kind of pointing out women who do that. And that's a more sexist thing, the very thing, you know, that we're guilty of and was brought up in the New York Times piece about
obviously, her. I think it was said as a bit of a joke, but also, yes, a few women, including Chelsea Clinton, defended her, but there wasn't, you know, you didn't have Now coming out and saying Kellyanne Conway is being mistreated.
Right. Look, the other thing I would say is by indulging in some of the attacks, I think she's taking away from the president's message some, which is what her job is to be driving, which I think is the biggest problem for her.
All right, my view is she has every right to respond, and I did ask the question. All right, let's get to Obamacare. Much of the media is savoring the sort of Republican dilemma on replacing the program. A conservative revolt against the plan, backed by Paul Ryan and praised by President Trump.
Folks, the Republican health care plan already has an identity crisis because the Republican Party still has an identity crisis, at least when it comes to ideology.
And it seems to me that if they do pass this, which I don't think they will, they're going to end up owning the problems Obamacare continues to have without really getting a great deal for it.
While the American Health Care Act is a step in the right direction, it is far from perfect. It must be fixed.
So how much are the media enjoying the spectacle of Republicans fighting Republicans over how to reform this program?
Love it. There's nothing that the media loves more than Republican on Republican violence. But I actually think the criticism you just showed is valid. I mean, if you talk about the Freedom Caucus, Rand Paul, Justin Amash, this is definitely going to be a fight that is going to go on for a long time, basically about the soul of the future of repeal and replace.
For 6 years, House Republicans kept repealing Obamacare 50, 60 times, and the press said, well, you don't have a plan. Well, now there is a plan, but it's hard to sell to everybody because you have a conservative wing that doesn't want to keep much of the program, and you have a president and the leadership that wants to sort of strike a compromise.
This plan is dead, but...
Dead?
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to have this.
How do you know that President Trump is not going to bring the party together?
We're not having this replacement.
Oh, you're saying there'll be some version.
You know, what the media's been running all week is that clip of Trump from the campaign, during which he's saying Republicans don't like this, but I want to have even bigger, better health care. He practically wants kids to stay on their parents' insurance until they're eligible for Medicare. He was telling what he was going to do.
Is the press doing a good job explaining all the complexities here about tax credits and subsidies and, you know, this?
Yeah, I think that actually dominated a lot of the week. I think the coverage has actually been quite good. And look, I think you're seeing Paul Ryan and Tom Price and others realize that they have to do a better job messaging, and they were saying that toward the end of the week, saying, okay, we need to do a better job talking about the 3 phases of this plan.
2 other issues. So Rex Tillerson traveling to Asia, first big overseas trip as Secretary of State, not taking reporters. He will hold a press conference. He'll talk to reporters who get there on their own. Very unusual for a new Secretary of State.
I don't understand this at all, and I think it only gives people in the media reason to question exactly what he is doing. If you take a position at that high of a level in the administration, you should definitely be bringing, you know, a pool of reporters with you.
I mean, Rex Tillerson is the anti-Trump when it comes to the media. He loves it. He manipulated it. He doesn't like what he's getting now.
Trump, yeah.
But Rex Tillerson is a traditional CEO. He doesn't like the media, and he doesn't want to be in it. But it would be to his benefit because he's kind of the absent cabinet secretary.
All right, lots of headlines in the last 48 hours. 2 front-page stories in the New York Times, 1 front-page story today in the Washington Post about the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, asking for the resignations of 46 U.S. attorneys, including, as it turns out, Preet Bharara, who is the high-profile U.S. attorney in Manhattan, the Southern District of New York, who refused to turn his resignation and had to be fired. Is this a story or a non-story? And I ask that because, as you know, there is quite a precedent here for other new presidents going this route.
Well, it's definitely news. It is a story to see all of these attorneys go and that they have to replace them. I think what makes it a little bit of a bigger story is that the White House said at first that they wouldn't be doing it in this fashion, and they went back on their word. They told Dianne Feinstein that they were going to do it in a staged process.
Okay, so
but it's not worthy of the uproar that it's getting.
Bill Clinton fired 93 U.S. attorneys, including Jeff Sessions at that time in Alabama. Got a letter from Janet Reno, but it was done a little less abruptly. But that seems to me, the press is insinuating there's something wrong with this.
It's far from historically unprecedented, as you just mentioned, with President Clinton. And I think this is the problem why people begin or already do distrust the media, because if it's something that's happened time and time again, and the media is acting like Donald Trump is doing something completely different, it looks like it's the crooked media trying to hurt him.
No, it's totally expected. But the most famous one is the one that's causing, I think, the stir, which is the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Preet Bharara.
Who perhaps is trying to get some headlines.
And Trump had hugged. I mean, Trump had hugged him, and I think, and that was well covered. But that was before Steve Bannon had taken complete possession of Trump's soul. Now
a little bit of a leap there.
A little bit of a leap. But now he wants to fire the guy he assured was going to keep his job.
All right, I think you may be getting a little Twitter response on that one. Just to be clear, U.S. attorneys are political appointees. They can get replaced like anybody else at the top when a new administration comes in. That's the way it works. Aaron McPike, Meghan McCain, Margaret Carlson. Thanks for coming by this Sunday. After the break, WikiLeaks reveals that the CIA can spy on you through your smartphone, even your TV, but should journalists be publicizing the dangerous leaks of Julian Assange? There are huge headlines over the latest dump by WikiLeaks, which says it's disclosing secret CIA technology that can spy on Americans through their smartphones, their laptops, even their TVs. That's obviously eye-popping and disturbing, but just how should the media be covering Julian Assange and a group that routinely pumps out classified information? Joining us now is Jillian Turner, Fox News contributor, vice president of Jones Group International, and former national security staffer in the Obama and Bush White Houses. All right, so let's start with WikiLeaks, your view of WikiLeaks, and then we'll get to how it should be covered, because I think there's a tendency in the press to say, wow, here's this latest stuff. Let's just throw it on TV and throw it on the web because it's hot and it'll get us a lot of clicks and ratings.
And I think that there is a press responsibility to report on it when there's something like this, a dump like this, absolutely. But above and beyond that, I think the press has a responsibility to not just spit out talking points that WikiLeaks itself provides. You know, they have this tendency now when they dump a tranche of documents like this to give you a nice little talking points type executive summary up at the top. And if any outlet is just using those to kind of base its analysis on and to present to its viewers and readers, I think that's irresponsible.
But this is an organization that seems determined to embarrass America, that actively worked in some fashion, it seems, with Russia in the hacking during the campaign of the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign emails and all of that. Should the media be a little more determined, a little bit more cautious in describing the group's motives rather than just sort of ripping and running with it?
Absolutely. And viewers should as well. The American people should be a lot more skeptical than they currently are. One of the problems I'm seeing is that folks during the campaign who supported Donald Trump are now jumping on board and saying they now have this idea that because WikiLeaks orchestrated this DNC dump during the campaign, that WikiLeaks is somehow pro-Trump. Make no mistake about it, this organization will turn on the Trump administration on a dime. Their primary focus here is trafficking in classified intelligence, classified information in order to embarrass the United States. They don't care who the president